Hey, happy Saturday. This is kind of still a rainy, I guess, afternoon on a Saturday. It's 2 o'clock here. Um, who's ready to study and learn a little bit more about A Tale of Two Cities? So I'm following this unit's recommendation. This is AMSCO Literature Program. And hey, Sid, so some of our vocabulary words for this section are going to be starting on page 24. Mutilated, and I think that might have been no, it's gonna be in the new section that we read. Hey, Fareed, got your Pfizer today. That's great. Teenagers are getting it. Okay, I have both my doses. My arm hurt like the dickens, pardon the pun. And still I'm aware of it. But then, back in the day, I did get the groceries, thanks, Fareed. Back in the day, I don't know what shot it is, but it left, might have been polio. It left a raised whelp on my arm. You can tell people's age because the newer vaccines don't do that. Um, and it was painful. So Siddharth, that was my only side effect with Pfizer. Um, let me know if you have the same thing. Now back to Dickens. Speaking of Dickens, mutilated is going to be a word we're looking for. Prevalent is going to be a word we're looking for. Homage, which is French, but homage in English. Transformation, coercion. I don't think the words they select are always the hardest words. Sometimes there's words we've come across that they didn't include. And we're on book 1, chapter 5, The Wine Shop. Now, I want you to know that this is sometimes confusing. This is a big scene change. And so I'm going to just tell you that this is now in France. So we're leaving the setting in Dover in England on the English side. Remember, it's the Tale of Two Cities. So you're going to see a lot of jumping back and forth between the two. And I know when I taught this, it confused my students. They had trouble keeping up. I don't know why I look so red there. That's still only for seniors, senior in high school or older people, because I'd heard that Canada's really holding on to their vaccinations, but my son is coming from Brazil, and he doesn't want to take a vaccine from someone in Brazil. He doesn't want to take one up because they're so hard to come by. So he's going to come visit and get his shot here, and I can't wait to see him. Maybe I'll get him to read one day for us. All right, so this in my book is page 24. It is chapter 5, The Wine Shop. A large cask of wine had dropped and broken in the street. The accident had happened in getting it out of a cart. The cask had tumbled out with a run, the hoops had burst, and it lay on the stones just outside the door of the wine shop, shattered like a walnut shell. So, hey, Fatima, the wine barrels, and I wish I could hold up a picture of a wine barrel. God bless you, Fatima, and God accept your sacrifice. I know that fasting is really tough, and hang in there. You're so sweet. So they had the hoops around them that held the individual pieces of the wood together that formed the barrel. And back in the day, those were called coopers. The people that made the barrel, they were coopersmiths. And so that band around the barrel would wrap. So this big wooden barrel full of wine falls off the wagon and splatters open onto the cobblestone sidewalk. All the people within reach had suspended their business or their idleness to run to the spot and drink the wine. The rough, irregular stones of the street, pointing every way and designed, one might have thought expressly, to lame all living creatures that approached them, and had dammed it into little pools. These were surrounded each by its own jostling group crowd, according to its size. Some men kneeled down, made scoops of their two hands, joined, and sipped, or tried to help women who bent over their shoulders to sip before the wine had all run out between their fingers. Others, men and women, dipped in the puddles with little mugs of mutilated earthenware, or even with handkerchiefs from women's heads, which were squeezed dry into infants' mouths. Others made small mud embankments to stem the wine as it ran. Others, directed by lookers on, up at high windows darted here and there to cut off little streams of wine that started away in new directions. Others devoted themselves to the sodden and lee-dyed pieces of the cask, licking and even champing the moisture wine rotten fragments with eager relish, like even biting on the wooden. So imagine, what would it take for you? Now remember, wine at this time is more like water. If if you're American watching this, we don't drink as much wine as Europeans did, and it's not for the alcohol. It is the drink, you know. So what would it take for you to get on your hands and knees and scoop up wine that's mixed into cobblestone? If you've ever seen cobblestone, they're rocks with mud wedged down in between them. So on the street, I mean, it doesn't have to be cobblestone. What would it take for you to drink wine, lap it up off the floor, off the ground? What would it take? A street. Imagine how dirty that is. So we're really being given some big hints about the conditions of this setting. And everybody, it's not just one or two people, the whole community just runs around this broken cask of wine to drink up as much wine as they can. Hey, Aman. There was no drainage to carry off the wine, and not only did it all get taken up, but so much mud got taken up along with it that there might have been a scavenger in the street if anybody acquainted with it could have believed in some miraculous presence. A shrill sound of laughter and of amused voices, voices of men, women, and children, resounded in the street while this wine game lasted. There was little roughness in the sport and much playfulness. There was a special companionship in it, an observable inclination on the part of everyone to join some other one, which led, especially among the luckier or light-hearted, to frolicsome embraces, drinking of healths, shaking of hands, and even joining of hands and dancing a dozen together. So they've made a fun moment, a festive moment out of it. Hey, Jaspreet, Pride and Prejudice, great. Yeah, finally, that's how you're going to feel about this book too. I hope you enjoyed it. Two things I thought of while I'm reading. Aman, I haven't read any of Jack Kerouac's, I can't ever say his name, book. One, I've been watching something on Netflix called The Big Day, and it's amazingly beautiful Indian weddings, and the Mehendi and the Sangeet, and all the celebrations and the traditions, and the colors are so marvelous. So if you guys are just looking for something brainless to watch that's joyful and pretty, try it's The Big Day on Netflix. The other thing is today, this is Saturday, the 17th of April. I watched this morning the funeral of Prince Philip of England. So very international thoughts today. I wondered if anybody else had watched the funeral and what you thought about it. I grew up, following the royal family of England, just particularly interested in it. I don't know why. So I just thought I'd mention that while I'm reading. All right, back to it. So these people are drinking out of the ground, this dirty ground, and now they've made a party, a festival out of it. When the wine was gone and the places where it had been most abundant were raked into a gridiron patterned by fingers, these demonstrations ceased as suddenly as they had broken out. The man who had left his saw sticking in the firewood he was cutting, set it in motion again. Remember, keep watching out for this wood cutting imagery. It's throughout, and I've yet to really get to the point of what it is. I'm hoping this time around I'm going to get it. And it's also in the movies I've watched. So it's maybe those of you that are studying, Kelly, I know you're good about research. What is the importance of the imagery or the symbolism of these woodcutters throughout the French portion of Tale of Two Cities? The firewood he was cutting set it in motion again. The woman who had left on a doorstep the little pot of hot ashes at which she'd been trying to soften the pain in her own starved fingers and toes, or in those of her child, returned to it. Men, now notice some hints, starved. So I went back to that question. What would make you drop everything and go lap up liquid out of the ground if you're really, really hungry? It's a show. It's a series, Fareed. So we're getting hints that these people are really, really hungry. Fingers and toes, or in those of her child, returned to it. Men with bare arms, matted locks, tangled hair, and cadaverous faces like death, so skinny, who had emerged into the winter light from cellars, moved away to descend again, and a gloom gathered on the scene that appeared more natural to it than sunshine. The wine was red wine, and it had stained the ground of the narrow street in the suburb of Saint Antoine in Paris. So we've jumped to Paris, and if I'm not mistaken, we jumped in time too, where it was spilled. It had stained many hands too, and many faces, and many naked feet, and many wooden shoes. The hands of the man who sawed the wood left red marks on the billets, and the forehead of the woman who nursed her baby was stained with the stain of the old rag she wound about her head again. Those who had been greedy with the staves of the cask had acquired a tigerish smear about the mouth, and one tall joker so besmirched, so marked with wine, his head more out of a long squalid bag of a nightcap than in it, scrawled upon a wall with his finger dipped in muddy wine leaves, blood. So across the wall, written in wine, much like blood, because it's red wine, is the word blood. The time was to come when that wine too would be spilled on the street stones, and when the stain of it would be read upon many there, meaning the blood would be filled too. I followed that British actor. Fireside Readings, yeah. Uh, I will look. That was the only one. Kelly is here. Kelly, I would love for you to answer that because I know you follow some other readers. You listen to a lot more audiobooks than I do. Most of my audiobooks I just get from my library. I'm listening to an audiobook now, but I don't even know who the reader is. But Kelly, I know there's somebody else on YouTube that you follow. If you are still there and you don't mind sharing that, and Aman, I'll try and find out for you too. And now that the clouds settled on Saint Antoine, which a momentary gleam had driven from his sacred countenance, the darkness of it was heavy. Cold, dirt, sickness, ignorance, and want were the lords in waiting on the saintly presence. Nobles of great power, all of them, but most especially the last. Samples of people that had undergone a terrible grinding and regrinding in the mill, and certainly not in the fabulous mill which ground old people young, shivered at every corner, passed in and out at every doorway, looked from every window, fluttered in every vestige of a garment that the wind shook. The mill which had worked them down was the mill that grinds young people old. The children had ancient faces and grave voices, and upon them and upon the grown faces, and plowed into every furrow of age and coming up afresh was the sign hunger. This community is hungry. It was prevalent everywhere. Hunger was pushed out of the tall houses in the wretched clothing that hung upon the poles and lines. Hunger was patched into them with straw and rag and wood and paper. Hunger was repeated in every fragment of the small modicum of firewood that the man sawed off. Hunger stared down from the smokeless chimneys and started up from the filthy street that had no offal. Among its refuse of anything to eat, hunger was the inscription on the baker's shelves, written in every small loaf of his scanty stock of bad bread. At the sausage shop, in every dead dog preparation that was offered for sale, hunger rattled its dry bones among the roasting chestnuts in the turned cylinder. Hunger was shred into atomies. I don't know what an atomy is. In every farthing porringer of husky chips of potato, fired with some reluctant drops of oil. Its abiding place was in all things fitted to it, a narrow winding street, full of offense and stench, with other narrow winding streets diverging, all peopled by rags and nightcaps, and all smelling of rags and nightcaps, and all visible things with a brooding look upon them that looked ill. In the hunted air of the people, there was yet some wild beast thought of the possibility of turning at bay. Depressed and slinking though they were, eyes of fire were not wanting among them, nor compressed lips, white with what they suppressed, nor foreheads knitted into the likeness of the gallows rope they mused about enduring or inflicting. The trade signs, and they were almost as many as the shops, were all grim illustrations of want. Everybody's hungry. they're thirsty, they're hungry, needing something, insufficient. The butcher and the porkman painted up only the leanest scrags of meat, the baker the coarsest of meager loaves. The people rudely picturing, this is 1775 that we're in, right? And it's been so long since I've read the book. I don't want to say anything because I'm not sure about my setting yet. Croaked over their scanty measures of thin wine and beer, and were gloweringly confidential together. Nothing was represented in a flourishing condition except tools and weapons, but the cutler's knives and axes were sharp and bright, the smith's hammers were heavy, and the gunmaker's stock was murderous. The crippling stones of the pavement, with their many little reservoirs of mud and water, had no footways, but broke off abruptly at the doors. The kennel, to make amends, ran down the middle of the street, when it ran at all, which was only after heavy rains, and then it ran by many eccentric fits into the houses, across the streets. At wide intervals, one clumsy lamp was slung by a rope and pulley. At night, when the lamplighter had let these down and lighted and hoisted them again, a feeble grove of dim wicks swung in a sickly manner overhead, as if they were at sea. Indeed, they were at sea, and the ship and crew were in peril of tempest. So we're really setting the mood here. For the time was to come when the gaunt scarecrows of that region should have watched the lamplighter in their idleness and hunger, so long as to conceive the idea of improving on this method. He started Anne of Green Gables again, right, Kelly? Am I right, or did he start a different one? At the end of this book, Cubs, don't give away the spoiler. I haven't. Sort of plot twist. It's I would say a plot twist. I'm thinking about it. Certainly, it's it's one of my favorite stories because of the ending. For the time was to come I read that, but the time was not yet come, and every wind that blew over France shook the rags of the scarecrows in vain, for the birds, fine of song and feather, took no warning. The wine shop was a corner shop, better than most others in its appearance and degree, and the master of the wine shop had stood outside it in a yellow waistcoat and green breeches. So he's got a yellow vest and green breeches means they go to the knee and they buckle there. Looking on it at the struggle for the lost wine. It's not my affair, said he, with a final shrug of the shoulders. The people from the market did it. Let them bring another. There, his eyes happening to catch the tall joker writing up his joke, he called him across the way. Say then, my Gaspard, what do you do there? The fellow pointed to his joke with immense significance, as is often the way with this tribe. It missed its mark and completely failed, as is often the way with this tribe too. What now? Are you a subject for the mad hospital? Said the wine shopkeeper, crossing the road and obliterating the jest with a handful of mud picked up for the purpose. So I'm wrong. I'm remembering now. This is the same time. It's just in France instead of in Dover. Why do you write in the public streets? Is there no other place to write such words in? In his expostulation, he dropped his cleaner hand, perhaps accidentally, perhaps not, upon the joker's heart. The joker rapped it with his own, took a nimble spring upward, and came down in a fantastic dancing attitude, with one of his stained shoes off his foot into his hand and held out. A joker of an extremely, not to say wolfishly, practical character he looked under those circumstances. Put it on, said the other. Call wine, wine, and finish there. With that advice, he wiped his soiled hand upon the joker's dress, such as it was, quite deliberately, as having dirtied the hand on his account, and then recrossed the road and entered the wine shop. This wine shopkeeper was a bull-necked, thick-necked, martial-looking man of 30, and he should have been of a hot temperament, for although it was a bitter day, he wore no coat, but carried one slung over his shoulder. His shirt sleeves were rolled up too, and his brown arms were bare to the elbows. Neither did he wear anything more on his head than his own crisply curling short dark hair. He was a dark man altogether, with good eyes and a good bold breadth between them. He's a big guy, so there's our direct characterization. Good-humored looking on the whole, but implacable looking too. Like you can't read his face. A man not desirable to be met, rushing down a narrow pass with a gulf on either side, for nothing would turn the man. So he stands his ground, he holds his own. Madame Defarge, those of you that are reading this for school, character, circle her, circle her. Madame Defarge, his wife, so the big man, the wine shop keeper's wife, is Madame Defarge, and he's Monsieur Defarge, sat in the shop behind the counter as he came in. Madame Defarge was a stout woman of about his own age, with a watchful eye that seldom seemed to look at anything, a large hand heavily ringed, a steady face, strong features, and great composure of manner. Tell me what that means, Anne OGG, Kelly? Is that something that reads? Oh, Anne of Green Gables, yeah. Madame Defarge was stout, so we got direct characterization of her there. Strong features and great composure of manner. There was a character about Madame Defarge from which one might have predicated that she did not often make mistakes against herself in any of the reckonings over which she presided. She's very confident, very sure of herself. She shows no weakness. Madame Defarge, being sensitive to cold, was wrapped in fur, had a quantity of bright shawl twined about her head, though not to the concealment of her large earrings. Her knitting was before her. She had laid it down to pick her teeth with a toothpick. Thus engaged, with her right elbow supported by her left hand, Madame Defarge said nothing when her lord came in, but coughed, just one grain of cough. The knitting is going to be significant. When I taught this book, we did that was part of our research of things, because this was historical fiction, things that were accurate that reflected in this story. Anne of Green Gables is one that you are reading for read, or you have. He's doing a good job. I'm sure he does a great job of it. And I love Anne of Green Gables. And she gives this cough, just this one short cough. The wine shopkeeper accordingly rolled his eyes about until they rested upon an elderly gentleman and a young lady who were seated in a corner. Other company were there, 2 playing cards, 2 playing dominoes, 3 standing by the counter lengthening out a short supply of wine. As he passed behind the counter, he took notice that the elderly man said in a look to the young lady, "This is our man." "What the devil do you do in that gallery there?" said Monsieur Defarge to himself. "I don't know you." But he feigned not to notice the 2 strangers, so the cough was a signal for him there's somebody in here you need to check out. Who do you think the older man and the younger woman are going to be? This is where you start putting things together. Remember, it's not always explicit. There's things that are implied, and you have to draw those conclusions. And that's oftentimes where you get lost in reading. You don't pick up on those connections. "How goes it, Jacques?" said one of those 3 to Monsieur Defarge. "Is all the spilt wine swallowed?" "Every drop, Jacques. Pay attention. Everybody's going to be called Jacques, and that's something you can look up historically too. "Every drop, Jacques," answered Monsieur Defarge. When this interchange of Christian name was effected, Madame Defarge, picking her teeth with her toothpick, coughed, I can't speak, coughed another grain of cough, and raised her eyebrows by the breadth of another line. "It is not often," said the second of the 3, addressing Monsieur Defarge, "that many of these miserable beasts know the taste of wine, or of anything but black bread and death. Is it not so, Jacques?" "It is so, Jacques," Monsieur Defarge returned. At this second interchange of the Christian name, Madame Defarge, still using her toothpick with profound composure, coughed another grain of cough and raised her eyebrows by the breadth of another line. The last of the 3 now said his say, as he put down his empty drinking vessel and smacked his lips. "Ah, so much the worse. A bitter taste it is that such poor cattle always have in their mouths, and hard lives they live, Jacques. Am I right, Jacques?" So there's 3 Jacques now. "You are right, Jacques," was the response of Monsieur Defarge. This third interchange of the Christian name was completed at the moment when Madame Defarge put her toothpick by, kept her eyebrows up, and slightly rustled in her seat. Hold then, true, muttered her husband. Gentlemen, my wife. The three customers pulled off their hats to Madame Defarge with three flourishes. She acknowledged their homage. You remember that was one of her words, by bending her head and giving them a quick look. So they've doffed their hats to her. What do you think an homage, to pay homage to someone, is to honor them, to give respect to them? By bending her head and giving them a quick look. Then she glanced in a casual manner around the wine shop, took up her knitting with great apparent calmness and repose of spirit, and became absorbed in it. Gentlemen, said her husband, who had kept his bright eye observantly upon her, good day. The chamber, furnished bachelor fashion, that you wished to see and were inquiring for when I stepped out, is on the fifth floor. The doorway of the staircase gives on the little courtyard close to the left there, pointing with his hand near to the window of my establishment. But now that I remember, one of you has already been there and can show the way. Gentlemen, adieu to God. Like, see you later. They paid for their wine and left the place. The eyes of Monsieur Defarge were studying his wife at her knitting when the elderly gentleman advanced from his corner and begged the favor of a word. Willingly, sir, said Monsieur Defarge, and quietly stepped with him to the door. Their conference was very short, but very decided. Almost at the first word, Monsieur Defarge started and became deeply attentive. It had not lasted a minute when he nodded and went out. The gentleman then beckoned to the young lady, and they too went out. Madame Defarge knitted with nimble fingers and steady eyebrows and said nothing. Mr. Jarvis Lorry and Miss Manette, that's who we expected them to be, right? How many of you got it right? Emerging from the wine shop thus, joined Monsieur Defarge in the doorway to which he had directed his other company just before. It opened from a stinking little black courtyard and was the general public entrance to a great pile of houses, inhabited by a great number of people. In the gloomy tile-paved entry to the gloomy tile-paved staircase, Monsieur Defarge bent down on one knee to the child of his old master and put her hand to his lips. It was a gentle action, but not at all. Now we got a big clue there. This Jacques Defarge, Monsieur Defarge, has knelt to Miss Manette and says has knelt to the daughter of his old master. So this is Defarge's relationship to Manette's father. He had worked for him. Let me see. It was a gentle action, but not at all gently done. A very remarkable transformation had come over him in a few seconds. He had no good humor in his face, nor any openness of aspect left, but had become a secret, angry, dangerous man. Big characterization, big foreshadowing. Do we trust this Defarge? We should not. This should tell you not to trust him. It is very high. It is a little difficult. Better to begin slowly. Thus, Monsieur Defarge, in a stern voice to Mr. Lorry, as he began ascending the stairs. Is he alone? The latter whispered. Alone, God help him. Who should be with him? Said the other in the same low voice. Is he always alone then? Yes. Of his own desire? Of his own necessity. As he was when I first saw him after they found me and demanded to know if I would take him, and at my peril be discreet, as he was then, so he is now. He is greatly changed? Changed. The keeper of the wine shop stopped to strike the wall with his hand and mutter a tremendous curse. No direct answer could have been half so forcible. Mr. Lorry's spirits grew heavier and heavier as he and his two companions ascended higher and higher. Such a staircase with its accessories in the older and more crowded parts of Paris would be bad enough now, but at that time it was vile indeed to unaccustomed and unhardened senses. Every little inhabitation within the great foul nest of one high building, that is to say, the room or rooms within every door that opened on the general staircase, left its own heap of refuge on its own landing, besides flinging other refuge from its own windows. So it's setting the setting for us. It's showing us the setting: filthy, dirty, crowded. The uncontrollable and hopeless mass of decomposition so engendered would have polluted the air even if poverty and deprivation had not loaded it with their intangible impurities. The two bad sources combined made it almost insupportable. Through such an atmosphere, by a steep, dark shaft of dirt and poison, the way lay. Yielding to his own disturbance of mind and to his young companion's agitation, which became greater every instant, Mr. Jarvis Lorry twice stopped to rest. Each of these stoppages was made at a doleful grating, by which any languishing good airs that were left uncorrupted seemed to escape, and all spoilt and sickly vapors seemed to crawl in. Through the rusted bars, tastes rather than glimpses were caught of the jumbled neighborhood, and nothing within range, nearer or lower than the summits of the two great towers of Notre Dame, had any promise on it of healthy life or wholesome aspirations. At last, the top of the staircase was gained, and they stopped for a third time. There was yet an upper staircase of a steeper inclination and of contracted dimensions to be ascended before the garret story was reached. The keeper of the wine shop, always going a little in advance and always going on the side which Mr. Lorry took, as though he dreaded to be asked any questions by the young lady, turned himself about here, and carefully feeling the pockets of the coat he carried over his shoulder, took out a key. So they've had to climb and climb and climb, and Mr. Jarvis Lorry can't keep up. He's winded and he has to stop, but the smell is so bad. And now they're at the top of the landing where the father's going to be. Steph, this is my first time catching you live. Yay. I just wanted to thank you. Your videos and Cry the Beloved Country have helped me a lot. Oh, great. Where are you reading it? In what level school and in what part of the world are you reading Cry the Beloved Country? I'm always interested to know who's reading what, where, and at what age. It kind of helps me make my next choices on what I want to read next. So thanks for being here. I'm glad you caught me. Guys, so we're at 31 minutes and I still have a page, 2.5 pages to read. Let's keep going. I'm trying to do a chapter each time. I think I decided there were 50 chapters or something like that in this book. Let's see. It's 30, 45 chapters. And I be in Greece. We were just talking about Greece. My son is a huge buff, my youngest son, of Greek mythology. And Greece is somewhere I have not been. So we keep talking about, are we going to go to Greece or not? One of my daughter's favorite teachers is Greek, and she has family there. And I forget what city. So we thought about renting from her and going on a trip to Greece. But, you know, COVID is closed. I'm supposed to go to Germany this year, and I don't know if that's going to happen. Then I have to save up for Greece. But yay, I'm glad you're here. Okay, so he's got the key. The door is locked then, my friend, said Mr. Lorry, surprised. Ah, yes, was the grim reply of Monsieur Defarge. You think it necessary to keep the unfortunate gentleman so retired? I think it necessary to turn the key, Monsieur Defarge whispered it closer in his ear and frowned heavily. Why? Why? Because he has lived so long locked up that he would be frightened, rave, tear himself to pieces, die, come to I know not what harm. Sometimes the syntax of this writing is hard for me because that's the way they spoke before. Come to I know not what harm if his door was left open. Is it possible? Exclaimed Mr. Lorry. Is it possible? Repeated Defarge bitterly. Yes, in a beautiful world we live in, when it is possible, and when many other such things are possible, and not only possible, but done. See you under that sky there every day. Long live the devil. Let us go on. This dialogue had been held in so very low a whisper that not a word of it had reached the young lady's ears. But by this time she trembled under such strong emotion, and her face expressed such deep anxiety, and above all such dread and terror, that Mr. Lorry felt it incumbent on him to speak a word or two of reassurance. Courage, dear miss, courage. Business. The worst will be over in a moment. It is but passing the room door, and the worst is over. Then all the good you bring to him, all the relief, all the happiness you bring to him, begin. Let our good friend here assist you on that side. That's well, dear friend Defarge. Come now, business. Remember, just treat it like business, not emotional. They went up slowly and softly. The staircase was short, and they were soon at the top. There, as it had an abrupt turn in it, they came all at once in sight of three men whose heads were bent down close together at the side of a door, who were intently looking into the room to which the door belonged, through some chinks or holes in the wall. On hearing footsteps close at hand, these three turned and rose and showed themselves to be the three of the one name who had been drinking in the wine shop. It's the three Jacques. I forgot them in the surprise of your visit, explained Monsieur Defarge. Leave us, good boys. We have business here. The three glided by and went silently down, there appearing to be no other door on that floor, and the keeper of the wine shop going straight to this one when they were left alone. Mr. Lorry asked him in a whisper with a little anger, Do you make a show of Monsieur Manette? I show him in the way you have seen, to a chosen for you. Is that well? I think it's well. Who are they? How do you choose them? I choose them as real men, of my name. Jacques is my name, to whom the sight is likely to do good. Enough, you are English, that is another thing. Stay there, if you please, a little moment. With an admonitory, so if you are interested in knowing who were the Jacques of the French Revolution, you can Google search that and you'll understand a little bit more of what's going on. With an admonitory gesture to keep them back, he stooped and looked in through the crevice in the wall. Soon raising his head again, he struck twice or thrice upon the door, evidently with no other object than to make a noise there. With the same intention, he drew the key across it 3 or 4 times before he put it clumsily into the lock and turned it as heavily as he could. He's trying to make the person inside be aware that the door is opening. The door slowly opened inward under his hand, and he looked into the room and said something. A faint voice answered something. Little more than a single syllable could have been spoken on either side. He looked back over his shoulder and beckoned them to enter. Mr. Lorry got his arm securely around the daughter's waist and held her, for he felt that she was sinking like she's going to pass out. A business, he urged with a moisture that was not of business shining on his cheek. Come in. I'm afraid of it, she answered, shuddering. Of it? What? I mean of him, of my father. Rendered in a manner desperate by her state and by the beckoning of their conductor, he drew over his neck the arm that shook his shoulder, lifted her a little, and hurried her into the room. He set her down just within the door and held her, clinging to him. Defarge drew out the key, closed the door, locked it on the inside, took out the key again, and held it in his hand. All this he did methodically, and with as loud and harsh an accompaniment of noise as he could make. Finally, he walked across the room with a measured tread to where the window was. He stopped there and faced around. The garret, built to be a depository for firewood and the like, was dim and dark, for the window of dormer shape was in truth a door in the roof, with a little crane over it for the hoisting up of stores from the street, unglazed and doesn't have glass, and closing up the middle in 2 pieces, like any other door of French construction. So it's a double door, and it's used to bring, for a storage room, you haul the barrels or whatever up into the room. To exclude the cold, one half of the door was fast closed, and the other was opened but a very little way. Such a scanty portion of light was admitted through these means that it was difficult on first coming in to see anything, and long habit alone could have slowly formed in anyone the ability to do any work requiring nicety in such obscurity. It's a very dark room. Yet work of that kind was being done in the garret, for with his back towards the door and his face towards the window where the keeper of the wine shop stood looking at him, a white-haired man sat on a low bench, stooping forward and very busy making shoes. And there's our first connection to Monsieur Manette. All right, so we did all the vocabulary, and I know we're at 39 minutes. So for those of you who aren't here to learn, go ahead and that sounds snooty. If you're not here to learn, just leave. What I mean is if you don't care about the vocabulary words, then that's what I'm going to spend this last bit on. So we've gone through, let's see, page 42. And where did I end off? No, we don't have all the words yet. Through 42 would be, this ends on 34. Okay, so here are the words that we've had so far. So starting at chapter 5, page 24, from 24 on. Here we go. Mutilated is our word. Mutilated. We have two choices. Remember, they give us two, like one excerpt from the book itself, and then a context clue, and then I'll give you 4 choices. Others, men and women, dipped in the puddles with little mugs of mutilated earthenware. That's where the word mutilated was used. The senator felt that his speech had been mutilated by the report, for a number of important points had been omitted. Me too, I'm glad, Fareed. So what do we think the word mutilated means? A, stimulated. B, accepted. C, improved. D, damaged. So what do you think the word mutilated means? Remember, I'll come back and read the answers after. So if you want to guess. If you're doing it at home, prevalent. Prevalent in the context was hunger, was prevalent everywhere. And the context clue, researchers discovered that malaria was prevalent in areas infested by mosquitoes. Now that requires you to know a little bit about malaria. So what is the meaning of prevalent? A, conquered. B, commonly occurring. C, easily rejected. D, unseen. The malaria was prevalent in areas infested by mosquitoes. Conquered, commonly occurring, easily rejected, unseen. Thanks, y'all. Bye. Still teaching. The next one is homage. And this is from the book. She acknowledged their homage by bending her head and giving them a quick look. Remember, I kind of told you what this one meant. The singer's fans paid homage to her by turning out in great numbers for her concert in Central Park, despite the rainy weather. So, A, homage means a show of loyalty. Homesickness. C, noisy disagreement. D, lukewarm appraisal. So what does homage mean? A show of loyalty, homesickness, noisy disagreement, lukewarm appraisal. And 30, transformation. A very remarkable transformation had come over him in a few seconds. That's about Monsieur Defarge, remember? And the context clue, when the interior decorator had completed the job, the owner of the house was amazed at the transformation. So A, upset. B, change. C, sight. D, stillness. So let's go back and get the answers. Mutilated means D, damaged. Prevalent means B, commonly occurring. Homage means A, a show of loyalty. Transformation means B, a change. And we didn't do the last one. So, all right, guys, that was our vocabulary for today. I hope you understand what's happening in the story. If you have any questions, you can shoot them to me at Best Tutor Friend on Instagram, or you can come join our Discord discussion. And I usually make some kind of comment after I read. I hope you guys enjoy your Saturday. We've got this kind of cool, I'm in long sleeves today, out on the patio. I feel like the weather girl as much as a reader. It is cool here today. You can hear the birds chirping. We've had tons of rain this week. I think it's supposed to remain cool this next week. And my big news is my son is coming from Brazil. I'm so excited about that. And again, maybe he'll join us for one of our reads. He's an English teacher in Brazil, so he's used to being on camera and he's used to teaching. He's a much, much smarter and better read person than I am. So you guys enjoy your Saturday. I'll probably read again tomorrow. I've got house chores to do now. Don't have anything fun lined up for the evening. And those of you that are on your Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, 6th day of Ramadan, God give you strength and blessing for your sacrifice. And good luck until iftar. And Kelly, thank you. I always appreciate you. So we will see you next time, and I will read to you next time. See ya.